week 6 of the fantasy football season, and here's a few players I look to buy and trade for this week. The first guy, Rhamondre Stevenson, the New England Patriots. So Stevenson, he was on the list last week, and once again, he's going to make it here. So Stevenson, we know, was drafted late second, early third round in most fantasy leagues, and one of the best receiving backs out of the backfield. But the last 3 weeks here, we haven't seen anything from Stevenson. Week 3 at the Jets, 19 carries, 59 yards, a catch, 3 yards. Week 4 at the Cowboys, 14 rushes, 30 yards, 2 catches, 10 yards. And then week 5 versus New Orleans, 8 carries, 24 yards. So he's struggling mightily. This New England Patriot team struggling mightily, only scoring 18 points in their last 3 games. So they're not moving the football well. Mac Jones hasn't looked good. But also they don't really have threats on the outside at wide receiver that could stretch the field and open things up here for Stevenson. So a few factors are definitely against them. They've been blown out over the last few weeks. He couldn't get a rhythm going. Ezekiel Elliott, he's still getting work in the backfield. And right now, while his value's at the lowest is Rhamondre Stevenson, this is a perfect time to buy him low, because I still think for the remainder of the season, he could be a running back that could put up low-end number 1 back numbers in PPR leagues or number 2 running back numbers, because like I said, he's one of the best receiving backs out of the backfield in football is Stevenson. And right now, while he hasn't done anything, where he's only had in PPR leagues over the last few weeks 15 fantasy points, this is a perfect time to buy him low, because we've seen games last season where he has a lot of big games as Stevenson. And right now, this Patriot team, I think they're going to get a little bit better and turn things around. And to be honest, they can't be any worse. So right now, Stevenson, well, you don't have to give up much to get him. Those perfect buy low candidate. This week, the next guy is Tony Pollard, the Dallas Cowboys. So Tony Pollard, each week, the numbers have gone down for Pollard pretty much. The first 3 weeks of the season, 15 or more fantasy points in PPR leagues. And now the last 2 weeks, we haven't seen much. Week 4 versus the Pats, 11 carries, 47 yards, 3 catches, 13 yards. And then week 5 at the 49ers, that game was done early and often. 8 carries, 29 yards, 4 catches, 35 yards, and a fumble loss. So right now, Pollard, good matchup week 6 at the Chargers, Monday Night Football. They give up the 6th most fantasy points to backs on the season. But like I said, every week the numbers have gone down for Pollard. From week 1 all the way to week 5, the fantasy points have gone down. But now, while he hasn't had a monster workload as Tony Pollard, most of these Cowboy games have been blowouts, one way or the other. The only close game pretty much for Dallas is week 3 at Arizona, where it was close most of that game, but they still lost by 12. So this season, no games have come down to the wire. It's either been Dallas blowing teams out or they've been blown out. And right now, while Tony Pollard struggled over the last few weeks, this is a perfect time to buy him low. He's still getting a good workload. Not really a threat in the backfield over there to him. Rico Dotto or Deuce Vaughn on every down backs, or guys who can carry the load. And this is a perfect time to go get Pollard, because we know what he's capable of. And we saw last season at times where he had some monster ball games and could carry a fantasy team for a few weeks. Next play is Jalen Waddle of the Miami Dolphins. So Waddle this season, the numbers just haven't been up to snuff. I don't know if he's 100% or not, still coming off a concussion in week 3. But this season, his best day has been 14.5 fantasy points only. So the last few games here for Waddle, week 4 at Buffalo, 4 catches, 46 yards. And then week 5 versus the Giants, 5 catches, 35 yards, and a touchdown. So he had that touchdown early in the game. And then pretty much it was all about the running game in the second half for this Dolphin team. After Tyreek Hill hit on a 69-yard touchdown, they just went on the ground the rest of the way. So right now, Waddle, we know he's a great receiver. Last season, over 1,300 yards receiving. And this season, he just hasn't had that patented game where he scored 25, 30 fantasy points. So right now, while that game hasn't come around here for Waddle, and fantasy owners, they have him as their number 1 wide receiver. They drafted him as. If they want running back and then Waddle second round, they're probably frustrated and want to get rid of Jalen Waddle. So right now, while he's struggling and not putting up those elite numbers, even though I think a breakout is around the corner like we saw with Jamar Chase here for Jalen Waddle, this is a perfect time to buy him low, because he's in an explosive offense. The targets are going to be there. Things are going to start get going where teams, they're going to even have to triple team Tyreek Hill, I think, sooner than later. Just the way he could break loose and get open with 2 safeties over the top or something and a corner, I don't know. But anyway, Jalen Waddle, I think the breakout's going to start coming for him. And this is a perfect time to buy him low. The next guy's Rachaad White of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So Rachaad White, he's been a decent number 2 running back so far in PPR leagues. And a few good things about buying him this week. His bye week's over. It passed here in week 5. And now he's got some decent matchups, Detroit and Atlanta coming up. So the last few weeks here for White, Week 3 versus Philly, 14 carries, 38 yards, 3 catches, 24 yards, a fumble loss. In Week 4 at the Saints, 15 carries, 56 yards, 3 catches, 22 yards. So he's the number one back, hands down. I know Sean Tucker, he's been getting some work, but he really hasn't had an impact in this backfield here for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So White, one of the better receivers out of the backfield, where last season he had over 50 catches in his rookie year. So right now, Rachaad White, I know he's not putting up great numbers, but as a number 2 running back and a player getting workload and can make plays and a good receiver out of the backfield, this is a perfect time to buy him low, especially with his bye week out of the way, where you don't have to worry about that and find a replacement or a guy off the bench for that week. So I would buy White this week. Next play is Saquon Barkley of the New York Giants. So Barkley, at first, they thought there was a chance he was going to play and not miss a game at all. And then the last 2 weeks, he practiced minimal, is Barkley, and just couldn't get on the field. So Barkley now, we haven't seen him since Week 2. And the first 2 games of the year that he did play in, Week 1 versus the Cowboys, 12 carries, 51 yards, 3 catches, 12 yards. And Week 2 with the Cardinals, 17 carries, 63 yards, a touchdown, 6 catches, 29 yards, and a touchdown. So right now, Sunday Night Football at the Buffalo Bills possibly could come back. The timetable was 2 or 3 weeks for Barkley, so now he's been out 3 weeks. And this Giant offense, they need a boost in any way they could get it. And now Daniel Jones possibly could be out after getting banged up and going for a neck MRI. We'll see what the results are going to be for that. But anyway, it's a tough matchup at Buffalo, even though we saw Travis Etienne just tear him up. But Saquon Barkley owners definitely can be frustrated that year in and year out. Pretty much, he's a player that doesn't see the field a lot, and he misses a lot of ball games. So right now, while Barkley's been out the last 3 weeks, we don't know what we're going to get from him. He's an explosive back, and to have a high ankle sprain, which is obviously a serious injury nowadays here, where he could even miss multiple weeks. But if you got patience, and if maybe you got to wait a week or 2 more here for Barkley. But right now, while his value's at the lowest, this is a perfect time to buy him this week. The next guy is Tyler Lockett of the Seattle Seahawks. So Tyler Lockett, we know each and every season, no matter what, at the end of the year, he's got 1,000 yards on the stat line here as Lockett. But so far this season, only 1 double-digit fantasy game, and that was Week 2 with the Lions, 8 catches, 59 yards, and 2 touchdowns. So Lockett, we know he's a burner. We know he's a solid possession wide receiver. He can run the routes, make the plays. And he's also is the number 2 guy over there behind DK Metcalf. He's Tyler Lockett, but he's a wide receiver that I think could go out there and make plays and help fantasy owners. And another good thing with him as well is his bye week is over here in Week 5. So now the rest of the way you're going to have him. I know there's going to be some great games, 25, 30-point fantasy games, and then some games where it's a pedestrian 7 to 10 fantasy points. So right now, well, the season hasn't been all that great for Lockett, but like I said, when it's all said and done, he's a 1,000-yard receiver each and every year with anywhere from 7 to 10 touchdowns. This is a perfect time to buy him low this week, and I don't think you got to break the bank to get Lockett on your team. And the final play I look to buy and trade for is T. Higgins of the Cincinnati Bengals. So T. Higgins this season, we haven't seen much out of him. And obviously now he's banged up once again with the rib injury, is T. Higgins. And in Week 5, we saw Jamar Chase go bonkers in that one, 192 receiving yards, 15 catches, and 3 touchdowns. So right now, Higgins, they gave him time to heal. And it wouldn't be surprising to me if they sit him out one more week here, is a Cincinnati Bengal team in Week 6 versus Seattle Seahawks, and then they go on bye in Week 7. So far, T. Higgins, like I said, this season, we haven't seen much out of Higgins, and he did miss Week 5's game, 12 catches, 129 yards, and 2 receiving touchdowns, and all that pretty much was in Week 2 versus Baltimore. We had 8 catches, 89 yards, and 2 touchdowns. So my opinion, I think they sit him out one more week. Then they come back in Week 8 here, is a Cincinnati Bengal team, and then he's good for the rest of the season. So right now, while he's banged up and the numbers haven't been up to snuff, even though it's a contract season for T. Higgins, he's a player I would buy this week. So that's a few plays I look to buy and trade for in Week 6 of the fantasy football season.